everyone to this week in Svelte episode 112. Oh gosh, there's a lot of episodes. And today with me, Jeppe from the Storybook team, and we will actually co-host today, so it's pretty nice. He is uh,
hmm
down to chit chat about the changelog with me. Um, and after that, he will actually talk about what he's about to talk today. And you've seen in the thumbnail, but it's Storybook, which is it's so big, like it's not big in the heavy sense, like big in the sense that it
It
does a
was
lot.
once.
So we need. It was also big in sense of dependency, but now it's actually very lean. And but he does so much stuff that he will actually be back for part two, maybe three, even four, in the next few Fridays to
hmm
actually showcase it properly. So let's jump right into the changelog so that we can actually see what's going on. So let's start with throw on duplicate class fields declaration. This was a very small fix. I think basically, technically, you could have multiple field declaration. Like you could declare a stateful variable and a getter, and I think that will conflict with how Svelte compiled the classes. And so now we actually throw an error there. Add types for part attribute to SVG attributes. Again, like a type PR, which, if I'm not mistaken, this was actually a first time contributor. So big up for
Good job.
whoever wants to contribute. Um, Always mark props as stateful. So probably there was some situation that I'm not aware of, to be fair. Let's see what the issue was. If you some component take a function as prop and passes that on a child component. Yeah, all right. So something like this, we can see like you had something like a default for. Oh, I can't. Basically, the issue was that when you invoke a function, you can see that the inner function was not updating if you didn't have, like when you had a default. So basically, if you had a default, this props was marked as known reactive, and so something changed. And but 7nic actually came clutch and fixed it. Um, Ignore component option in compile module. So as of Svelte 5, as you may know, you can now also write, you can also compile .svelte.ts file. And so we are using a different compile method. So you can compile a component or you can compile a module. And up until this moment, if you passed some external component option, some external option to compile module, um, it would have errored. But this was creating a bit of problem in the Vit plugin because, like, to adapt to the fact that we now have async, they had to pass the option. Like, basically, they had to pass the option even if compile module was not supporting it. I think I can't remember specifically what the problem was, but it was creating a problem. Basically, Vit plugin Svelte was passing some component option into the compile module, and so with these changes, we are basically ignoring the component option if you pass them to compile module, so that inside Vit plugin Svelte we don't have to branch and change, like remove properties from an object if it's a compile module. Remove some to-dos. That's a nice PR. I think this was an effort from Ocean that saw some to-dos scattered all over the code base and said, "Well, let's actually do something and make the code base better." This was a super fun issue that they opened and allow a wait expression inside a wait argument. So if you want, now you can actually write code like this, which is super silly, but it's nice. Like you can technically do await promise not resolve 42.
What's the difference?
Literally nothing. I don't know why.
Okay.
Basically, the point is like instead of awaiting directly the promise, you are awaiting the return value of the promise. Uh, I don't think it even make a difference. Like you are literally awaiting something that is not a promise because based on how JavaScript works, even if you return a promise from promise.resolve, it will be awaited in one batch. So you are basically awaiting a known promise. But before version 5.37.1, you will get an error, and now you can do it. Why you would do it, I don't know. That's why I think it's silly, but I think it's nice that it's a bug fix. Append styles in an effect to make them available on mount. So this is something that when you're doing something like this, so when you're using the CSS normally, let's say that I have a style tag, and I do be cool, and you can do be color red, something like this. You can add svelte options CSS is equal to injected. And if you do this, you can see that basically, if you take a look at the compiled code, we are compiling the CSS as a JavaScript object, and then the CSS is actually appended at the beginning of the component. Now, to make sure that you are actually adding the CSS, like that the element is actually there, we were doing this in a microtask. So we were queuing a microtask and appending the styles. And before async, it was fine because every effect that you could like execute after, it would have been executed after the styles were appended. But since async is a thing now, effects are scheduled in a batch. It's a bit complicated, but the point is that if you just queue a microtask in a component, the effect will run before the microtask. And so we just change it so that append styles are actually appended inside an effect so that they are available when you are running some effect. This was mainly a problem because if you were building a custom element, for example, people might do something like $host dot styles is equal to color red, for example. So like they will emit an event if the host has a certain style. Sorry. So yeah, small fix. Remove parser.template untrimmed. I don't know what this is about. So I think it's probably some unused code. Always inject style when compiling as custom element. This is kind of sprouting from append styles. Like we actually realized that we were not injecting styles when building as custom element. And since for custom element, you actually need to inject the style tag within the custom element, you always need to inject styles. So if you were building a library and setting the option globally, it was automatically including CSS. But if you did something like this, which you can do, like you can do Svelte options custom element is equal to tag my element, for example. If you were doing something like this without the global option, this is still building a custom element, so styles still need to be injected. And before it was not. As you can see, right now it's not injecting the style. So if we have a simpler component, let's say you're building this and you want to do something like this. As you can see right now, like the div is not properly styled, but if you switch to the latest version and you leave, now styles are actually injected, which is better. By the way, I think, yeah, that's a nice addition to the playground. 7Nick added this. But now, instead of fumbling with the URL, which is a bit annoying, you can actually change the Svelte version here.
Oh wow!
So you can
That's kind of quality.
and you can actually do something like 37. If you do this, it will actually fetch the latest 37 version. So it's actually respecting somewhere, which is nice.
Nice.
All right. So fix double event processing in Firefox due to event object being garbage collected. This is actually a PR that was fixed, and then it was fixed again because this fix actually was not fixing the fix, fixing the bug. But this is something very weird that happened in Firefox. Basically, so in Svelte, there is event delegation. And it means that if you do this button on click console.log, this will be Svelte, like this. We can actually remove this. As you can see here, instead of adding an event listener on the button itself, we are just adding this property, __ click on the button, and then we are delegating. So what this does is that basically instead of adding a bunch of event listener during iteration, it will add one single event listener to the body. And after it adds to the body, basically when you click on the button, the thing that is actually running is the event listener in the body. But since it knows that you clicked on a specific button, it's executing this function here. So you basically, this is much more performant than adding a bunch of event listener. However, basically, we need to add two event listener, actually. One on the body, which is the global one. But we also need to add an event listener to where the component was mounted, because sometimes you might portal some element from where the component was mounted to another place. And we still need to be able to invoke listeners on that element, even if you move it inside the DOM. And so basically what is happening is that we start by the mounting, which is the closer element. And if you are on the mounting and you get invoked, we basically mark that listener as already run. And so when it bubbles up to the body, it says, okay, it's already run, and then we can skip it. We can prevent from running. The problem is that in Firefox, for some reason, between the time that you click on the button and the first handler runs, and when it bubbles up to the body, that marker is actually garbage collected. And so it was running a second time on the body because it went and checked, is this already run? And it actually was already garbage collected. And so basically this required a couple of PR to get right. And so we are now basically, to be fair, it's a bit of a hack because we are basically just saying, okay, let's just do a useless check so that this thing is not garbage collected. So it's a bit of a hack, but it's the most performant way to fix this thing. So it's fine. Add bindable dimension attributes type to SVG and MathML elements. So again, a type PR, which I think is also a first-time contributor. So if you like this, I think it was also my first contribution. My first contribution to Svelte was adding types for something. So it's actually a pretty easy PR that you can do. If you see that there's some type missing,
that's great.
PR. Correctly differentiate static fields before emitting duplicate class field. So we've seen that we have this error on duplicate class fields declaration. It was not differentiating between static and instance class. So if you add static create and an instance create, it will wrongly emit this error. While it's perfectly fine. Okay, that actually was our last Svelte release. So let's switch to a much juicier one, which is SvelteKit. You see it here, but it's actually the only PR. because we have a new release of SvelteKit 2.27.0, and now you can use remote function. It's finally here. It's a brand new way to load data from the server to the client. It's heavily inspired by Telefunc, and you need to let's actually see the documentation so that I can show you perfectly right information instead of babbling. So remote functions, here it is. So you need to enable an experimental for the moment. So you need Kit experimental remote functions, which, pay attention, it's a bit different from the experimental that you need to enable for async, because it's under the Kit experimental, no, just experimental. So if we switch back to await, to enable await, you need to do compiler option experimental async true, and to enable remote function, you need to do Kit experimental remote function true. I know it's a bit confusing, but hopefully we are going to remove this experimental. I mean, not really soon, because for await we cannot remove it before Svelte 6, but it is what it is. It's experimental for the moment, so test it and report bugs, please, because we want to get everything done right. And how you use it is that you can create a .remote.js or .ts file, and then you can basically export from this file functions that are created like this. So you can create a query like this, and you create a query and you pass an async function, and you can do stuff here, for example, query from the DB, or do whatever you want, and then you export this function, and then you can just use it inside your component. So remote function basically are matched in heaven with await, because with await you can actually await them directly in the template, which is very nice, or inside the derived. However, you can also do this if you don't want to await. If you can't enable await for some reason, you can also do something like this. So you can just invoke getPost in the script tag, and then do query.error to see if there is an error, query.loading to see if it's loading, or query.current to get the actual value. But again, await is much, much better. So if you can enable await and use it.
But if you use await, can you do the error and loading states as well?
You still get them, because that's a nice thing. Basically, those queries are denable. So you can await them, but you also have properties on them. So for example, query, you still get error, loading, and current if you want to use it somewhere else. But if you if you need some parameter, I don't know if you noticed this, but now you also get params as a prop in a Svelte, in a root component, so that this is the parameters of if you are inside a root that looks like this, you get the slug there. Now, if you need some input, like getPost, for example, you need to pay attention, because obviously, while it looks like they are just function call, under the hood, they are creating some API endpoint. So TypeScript will yell at you if you pass something different, but you need to be aware that under the hood, those are creating endpoints that possibly other people can call. And so you actually need to provide a validation. And you can use any standard library validation. So in this case, we are using Valibot here, which is a lighter alternative to Zod. Actually, I think they are pretty close with Zod 4. But yeah, I think it's. I'm also a huge fan of Valibot. I use it on all my projects. And so you need to validate. You need to provide validation for the arguments, so that you can be sure that if it's here, it's actually a string. And then you can just do this, and it works. If you want to refresh some query, you can do this. So you can invoke the query again and then do .refresh. And this will basically, an important note is that query are cached while they're on the page. So if you do get post is equal to get post, it will return literally the same value. So that's why you can do get post .refresh. And so you don't need a reference like get post and then post.refresh, but you can do it if you want. Another, so other than query, we have form. Form is basically a new way to do progressive enhancement. So form will, you can basically spread the value of form in a form.
Oh, wow.
And this will give you an action. It will give you an onSubmit function so that when JavaScript is enabled, it will actually do everything through JavaScript. But if JavaScript is not enabled, it will actually submit the form correctly. And when you submit the form, this function will be invoked. And this is just like an action that you have today. So you get the form data here, so you can get the information from the server, so from the form. And so you can say form data dot get title, get content, and do whatever you want. And obviously you can redirect or you can return values and stuff like that. And so this is basically how you can modify data on the server if you want. Also, this is very, very nice, but you can also enable single flight mutation. What this means is that, for example, in this case, let's say that you are showing a list of posts. Like this. You are showing a list of posts. And when you create a new post, you want to invalidate get post. So if you remove this line, what happens is that when you create a new post, you will send the information to the server. The server will answer, okay, it's all done. And then get post, like you will do another query to get post, and get post will return the actual value. So it's a lot of back and forth to the server. But if you do something like this, for example, you know that when you create a post, get post will need to be refreshed. So if you do something like this, what happens is that once you do the query to create a new post, the return value, like what the server will return, will also include the new posts. So instead of doing an extra API call, it will just update the value on the page, which is super cool. And I think it's not shown here, but you can also do this on the client. So if you want, you can specify which kind of, like, if you, in this case, you know that when you create a post, you want to refetch get post because like it's updating get post. But there's also a way to do it on the client, and we will get to it in a bit, I suppose. Oh, by the way, if you want to enhance it in a different way, you can do create post.enhance. So this is similar to use enhance in that basically this function will be invoked before the request is actually sent to the server if JavaScript is enabled. And so you can await submit, and then you can reset the form and show a toast, for example. Or if it fails, you can show a wrong notification, basically. And this is what I was talking about. When you do, when you want, like basically, if you want to refetch something from the client, so like you want to tell from the client what to refetch, you can do submit.updates. So when you invoke submit, you can specify, hey, those are the queries that I want to update after the submit finishes. And so, for example, you could do something like this. You submit, and then you update get post. And that's the nice thing. You can also do with override that allow you to very quickly add optimistic update. So if you know that like it's very likely that your server will be able to add the post and you will not error out, what you can do is that you can say, okay, submit this form that update get post, and while it's still updating, show the new post together with the old ones. so that basically it's all done like optimistically, so the post will show up immediately, and then when the submit actually finishes, the override will be like removed and the new data will actually be fetched. So that's pretty nice. If you want, like, you know that, I mean, I don't know if you know, but if you don't know, you can also submit a form from a button. So like, let's say that you have a situation like this, you have a form and you want to either log in or register. What you can do, like this is just straight up HTML, you can say that this form should be submitted to a different endpoint by doing button form action is equal to the different endpoint. In SvelteKit, basically you can do this. So you can get your two forms functions, and you can spread the normal one here. And if you want to spread it on a button, you can do register button props, and this will actually make. So when you click on the register button, it will make it will basically call this function instead of this one. Another way of updating the information on the server is command, which is like form, but it's just basically via JavaScript. So it's not using a form. It's just if you invoke a function to change something. And so it looks something like this. For example, add like, it receive a string. Like you need to validate these two. With form, we are not passing validation because you just receive form data, which is always the same structure. Like you cannot pass anything else to a form. With command, you can pass something else, so you still need to validate it. And then you can basically just do this, and then you just call the function on the client. So you can do await, add like, item.id. And just like with the submit, you can also do single flight mutation for command, so just like before. Or using updates on the client. So on the client, you can do updates, and you can also use with override here. So if you want.
What's the difference between doing it on the client and on the server?
I mean, it's just where do you want the information to live? Like effectively, it's the same thing. Like for what SvelteKit is concerned, it's the same. It's just that sometimes maybe you want to do, I don't know, updates only on a specific condition. Like let's say that you are either adding a like or I don't know, something else. So
I see.
This basically, in this way, you can do this code from the client if you want to control from the client which queries are refreshed. And if you know, like for example, that every time you add a like, you are 100% sure that you want to refetch get likes, then you can just add this on the server, and that will work every time without you having to specify it. There's also
can't use with overrides on the server side, right?
I think no. No, I suppose no, because like with overrides is just basically overriding the state on the client to show it immediately. So when you are calling with override, you're basically saying, okay, even if like there is an API call succeeding right now, in the meantime, update this stateful variable so that it shows these other values. So it will not make sense to have it on the server. Pre-render is also pretty cool because with pre-render, like this function is executed at build time. And so if you return this, like, I don't know, the list of posts for your blog, the nice thing is that since it will not be dynamic, like you will republish every time you publish a new post, this information, like this DB query will not need to run on runtime. So it will be executed on build time, and a JSON file will be available so that you can just fetch that JSON file, and that JSON file will also be forever cached because it's static. And so you can just very quickly fetch the list of all of your posts without actually contacting a server, which is pretty nice. And same thing, you can pass some argument, and you can pass some argument, There is a caveat here, and it's the fact that, so if you pass some argument, you can pass the inputs like this, which basically tells Svelte, okay, I'm gonna pre-render this, but like this is the list of posts that I want to pre-render. Otherwise, Svelte will crawl your application just like it does with pre-render nowadays. The only problem is that right now, there's no asynchronous server-side rendering. It's coming, so Elliot is already working on it. And this means that if you are going to use await get post in this case, like since it's inside a boundary, it will never be reached by Svelte. And so if you want to use pre-render nowadays before async SSR, you are kind of forced. And if you want to use it with async, with await, you are kind of forced to define all of your inputs, which, to be fair, is something that I still tend to do. Whenever I use pre-render, I tend to pass the entries to the pre-render, because you can never know. Like, I don't trust myself to actually have a link to everything that I need to pre-render. So, for example, let's say that you are pre-rendering, I don't know, the list of our blog post, but then you are using pagination, for example, on the homepage, and you're not actually showing everything for some reason, then it might affect your thing. So generally, whenever possible, I always pass the second argument because it's nicer. Pre-render functions are excluded from your server bundle, which means that you cannot call them with any argument that are not pre-rendered. You can set dynamic to true to change this behavior. All right, so handling validation error. So there is a new hook that you can pass to the server, which is handling validation error. And this hook will be invoked whenever like the validation part of a command or a query or pre-render will fail. So you will get this, and you can return some new message if you want. By the way, if you don't want to validate for some reason, please don't do it. But if you want to do it, you can also pass the string unchecked instead of a schema. And then basically your function will be like, you need to take care of validation then, because please don't do it again. By the way, to get information about the cookies and the rest of the stuff, you can use get request event, which is something that is already available in SvelteKit. And this basically returns you the event that you are generally passed from the load function. And so you can get cookies, you can get locals, you can get fetch, you can get whatever you need inside get request event. And this is pretty nice because basically, as you can see, you can build some like self-contained utility function that will always return the user, or I don't know, like fail for some reason. So that's pretty nice. Obviously, you can use redirect inside query, form, and pre-render. It's not possible inside command because if you're doing a command, you should avoid redirecting. If you absolutely have to, you can return a redirect location object and deal with it in the client. So a command is basically like a function call. So if you are submitting a form, you can redirect. If you query, you can redirect because maybe you're fetching some data and you're not logged in and you want to redirect. But if you are invoking a function, generally you should not redirect because it's just, again, some function call. And so you can do that, and then on the client actually do window.location move, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's it for remote function. Take a look, try it, and report any bugs. And again, it's experimental, but it's pretty nice.
Really cool. I mean, super. I mean, this is going to be really, really interesting to see what people build with this.
I literally cannot wait for async SSR because I want to basically move all my website to this. But I am also very keen on progressive enhancement, so I will not touch even my side project if I cannot make it work with progressive enhancement. And right now, if I want to use a weight in a component, I need to basically it will only work on the client for the moment. So I'll wait for async SSR and then I'll switch everything over. Let's see, new release of adapter Cloudflare resolve the absolute part of the Wrangler config settings asset directory in case the config file is in a different directory than the root project. That's some edge case. I think the moment a PR title is that long, you know that it's an edge case. There are two new releases for SV. Align project steps. I think this is just something that there was different steps based on different project, and so now they're all aligned. Allow passing an array of import name to imports add named. So this is something internal. They have some utility to add a new import, for example. And before it was just accepting one name, and now you can add multiple names. Add Vite add plugin to simplify adding a plugin on various Vite config styles. So some utility release for SV. So this is something that I actually suggested, and it came up I did a workshop on tests, and I discovered that in Vitest, if you have an assertion without a function, or if you don't have any assertion inside the it function, basically, it will count as a pass. So basically what happened, let me show you something from Blue Sky that I posted a bit of time ago, because it was it was very silly, but basically, let me see. I did post a bit of time ago, so sorry. I need to scroll in a bit. I do post a lot. Here it is. All right. So if you had something like this, it expect from Vitest, and you did something like this. I mean, this is silly, and it's something that happened by chance. But this it here, it's technically a separate declaration that has nothing to do with this function, which is just laying there. And this will actually pass. So I talked with one of the Vitest maintainer, and from Vitest 4, this will actually be a to-do, which is way better because it was the intended way. So if you want to write, okay, I need to write a test for this, but now I don't have the brain power to do it, you can just do it does something, and then you don't add the implementation. That's cool. It will be a to-do in that case. But as of today, it still uses, it still passes, basically, which is a bit confusing. And so I said, I think we should actually require assertion. So there is an option for Vitest to fail if there's no assertion inside the function. And this is actually disabled in Vitest because they allow you to use expect from a different library. So if you want, you could use expect from Jest inside Vitest. But if you are actually using expect from Vitest, like most new projects that are created with SV, require assertion is probably a good default. Remove git init next step when creating a new project. Oh, I don't know if I like this. I like to have a new repo already enabled, but I guess it's fine.
Right.
Handle satisfies, improve minimal template. There are multiple things. So move favicon.svg to source lib asset. So this is nice because favicon SVG, generally it was inside the static folder, but effectively it's better if Vite handled it. And so now moving it to source lib asset, it will show the new project users the fact that you can inline and have immutable assets. It will add a robots.txt so that static is still a thing. And it will show a root layout where the favicon is added. So you also get, how can I say, an example of how to use a layout of Svelte. This is also another thing that I heavily syndicated for, which is currently when you add drizzle, which is like ORM, we generate a db migrate script, but we don't generate a db generate script. This means that if you try to run db migrate, there's nothing to migrate because you are never generating this and you don't know how to do it. Because you might probably search the drizzle documentation, but we are there, we are creating a project for you, we can ease that experience for you. And this was probably just it's literally the same thing, but with less things. So it's the same release. Let's see. We don't have any other release. Let's see just the tracker. Interrogating rich. So there is this to emit await reactivity loss in for await loops. So if you are using a for awaiting at the top level of a script tag, I don't know why you would. Please don't. But if you want, now if you for some reason this leads to reactivity loss, you get a warning. This is something I'm working on, and I'm pretty happy that I got started on it. Because I'm adding a developer guide to the code base, so that if you want to contribute to Svelte, this will basically show you around the code base inside the code base. So it's a huge markdown file that it will teach you how to contribute to Svelte, which is pretty nice. This is all old stuff. Yeah, this is all old stuff. Let me see if we have something in SvelteKit, and then we can move away and actually go to something interesting, which is what...
Oh, this is also interesting. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, yeah, this is taking a bit of time. All right. I think mention read works in Edge environment. This is just a doc PR. Remove a non-syntax header from service worker page. All right. Upgrade to cookie 1.0.2. Yeah, this is very old. This is cookie actually introduced a breaking change, and in 0.7. And so we upgraded, but then we realized that we were breaking change other people, and so we reverted it. And so now, so there's not much to do here. There is this remote function that was already merged, so it's fine. All right, let's switch to something interesting. So if you want to share your screen,
sure.
I'll stop sharing mine. And all right, so let's talk about Storybook.
Right. So as you said in the beginning, there's a lot to talk about, and so we're going to split this into multiple episodes, because otherwise I could be here for 4 hours. And so this episode, we're just going to introduce people to Storybook. So if you are here and you already know what Storybook is, this might not be new. Then you can relax with the coffee. But if you don't know what Storybook is, then listen up. And then in the later episodes, I guess we're going to dive deeper into what you can do with Storybook and Svelte. But so essentially, Storybook is a tool that you can use to develop UI. It's a tool that has existed for probably 7 or 8 years now. I can't remember. In the beginning, only for React, but then later added other framework support. And now we've for a long time we've had Svelte support, but it really improved a lot over the past few years.
Oh, definitely.
And so what you can do with Storybook is that you spin it up next to your application. So you don't add Storybook to your SvelteKit or Svelte application. You spin it up separately in a separate process on a separate port. And it allows you to develop on your components in isolation. So instead of when you're building your form or when you're building your button, you don't necessarily want to see how it behaves in that page that you're at. You want to see how could this behave in any page anywhere. And that's what Storybook gives you. Just looking at the component, completely isolated from anything else. And then you can plop in your component wherever you want. And so this is an example of a card component that you're been shown in Storybook because you defined it. And then you can play around with a bunch of controls that I'll show off later, and you can define different states and different scenarios for your components. We call them stories. And a story is essentially, I have this component that is getting these props and it's being rendered in this specific environment. Maybe it has a specific viewport and has specific state, and one story encapsulates all of that in a single scenario. And so you can have one component that can have many different scenarios. What if you render this component in a large viewport, or in a small one, or light or dark theme, or with these different prompts? And so you can have hundreds of stories for a single component, or you can have just one if you want to. That's the essential part of Storybook. We talk about how Storybook has 3 pillars. So we have development, documentation, and testing. And today we're going to talk a lot about the development part, which is basically, with Storybook, how do you write these stories for your UI components, and how do you do it in a component first way. And then in the later episodes, we're going to go into how you can use Storybook for documenting your components, documenting a design system, or just documenting a SvelteKit application for other engineers on the team, or when you want to onboard new engineers. And then finally, we're going to talk about testing, because you can use Storybook to test your UI as well in different dimensions of tests. But that's not for today. Today we're going easy on y'all. And so I don't think there's something I want to go into here. I just basically want to get started writing some code.
Yeah.
And so I have this folder. Let me zoom in a bit. And we're going to add a basic SvelteKit application without any Storybook at all, just so you can see how you could use it. So there's an SV command, create. I guess if I do dot, then it's just going to put it in this ng folder.
Yes.
Let's do the demo one just for fun. And we'll not use TypeScript. There's a lot of add-ons that you can add to your Svelte stuff here. And there's also a Storybook. So you could enable this and then just have it installed. I'm not going to do that today, because I want to show you how you can also add it later if you need to. So we won't have anything, and we will be using old school NPM.
And we can see each other in like 15 minutes. It's actually fast.
Right. Let me just see if we have anything in here. We do. And so that's cool. And we should run, let's see if we have the SvelteKit server running. And I will have what was the port? Was it 3000?
No, it should be 5173.
Oh yeah,
unless
sure.
you have.
Right. Oh, it got there. No, it did not. 5173.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we have it. So that's my SvelteKit app. Nothing Storybook related to this at all. Now we can do 2 things. We can use the SV command to add Storybook, because the add-ons of the SV command, they can also be added later. We can also just run Storybook create directly. I'm just going to do that because that's what I'm familiar with. But
yeah,
it does the same thing. It's just a wrapper.
Yeah.
And so we can do npx Storybook. You want a version always, so you don't get a cached one. And then let's do something else instead. Let's use npm create Storybook. We just released 9.1 yesterday, I think. I'm on vacation, so I don't know. But I think the cool guys at the office, they released it. And then it asks you if you want the minimal part or the bigger part that also includes docs and testing. And we're going to do with the recommended bigger, well, the full feature set, because then we can dive into that later.
Yeah.
The minimal part is, of course, faster to install and has less boilerplate. We're installing a bunch of stuff. Flickering. That's also part of the experience.
I mean, it is nice sometimes because like at least you know that it's doing something.
Oh, that's true. That is true. I'm gonna say that to my wife next time she complains about something. Well, at least you know that it does something.
Yeah.
And now it's also adding a bunch of add-ons, and that's because in Storybook there's the core experience, and then you can add more stuff. You can add community add-ons, like you just saw that it was adding add-on Vitest, but you can
Mhm.
also add core add-ons, and then it spins up Storybook, and this is how Storybook looks. So what you get out of the box is this documentation site or documentation page, configure a project. It's like a here's what you can do with Storybook.
Yeah.
And then you have a few example stories. So we can go through those. Let's skip the docs part for now. This is a story for a button component that Storybook brings with it. And then you see the actual thing to render in the middle. We call this preview. On the left side, we have the sidebar where you can see each component. And then with each story defined here, primary, secondary, large, and small. There are multiple components here. On the top, there's a bunch of tools. They're pretty simple for now. These tools, they can define how you want to render this. So because we have the accessibility add-on added by default, there's some accessibility tooling here. You can say, how does my button look like in grayscale? And then it turns gray. Or
Which,
if you
by the
have,
way, I literally discovered this like 1 week ago. Like,
yeah, it's
and
pretty powerful.
yeah, it's very very nice because like I mean I wish I would take accessibility even more serious than what I do, but I do take accessibility like serious enough,
Hmm.
and like being able to actually test the like again, this is how it looks like when like someone has poor vision.
Mm,
Like it's very important because like once you get the experience, you will
yeah.
optimize for it.
Yeah, and you can also you can go through the WCAG accessibility standards and follow those, right? But they don't. I think they don't always define like what if you have a red, blue, whatever color
Yeah,
blindness.
yeah, yeah,
That doesn't really help you in those. But so you can see how that would behave here. And in this purple button, it won't be a difference. But you could imagine that
yeah.
it would be a difference. So that's just an example of what a tool can do. And then at the bottom, you have an add-on panel. There's a nifty trick if you do need a taller screen. You can actually move the add-on panel to the right um, if you need that. And there's a bunch of add-ons here. There's controls, there's actions, and other stuff here. And this controls one is, for me, I think it's my favorite one. It's the most powerful one when you're developing your your components, and it basically allows you to on the fly change the environment of this component. So right now it's set up to just change the props. This button takes in a primary prop that you can toggle, and you can see how that changes. You can also change the label, and then it upgrades. One cool note here, if you're geeky, is that these controls, they use reactivity. So it's like we're not remounting the component every time. We're just changing the props. And so what this does a lot, I've seen now multiple times, it catches people off because they have not written their components to be reactive
Mhm.
because they forgot to do derived or whatever. And so when they change this label, they're like, "Oh, why doesn't my component update? There's a bug in Storybook."
Yeah.
No, you just didn't follow the reactivity principles. That's pretty funny every time we run into that. Um, and then people, they find bugs in the components, of course, because they use this, right? There's also like enum support, so there's a small and medium and large button,
Mhm.
and this is for you when you want to play around with the component. Is what I say usually with these controls. If you want to have a static snapshot of this is how my button in the primary way lives, I'm writing a primary story. We're going to go into how you write stories in a minute, and then you'll also write a secondary story for how it looks like with the primary being false. and a large and a small, and all of your components, right? So when you want to, how do you say, you want to say this specific set of props for my component, I want to make sure that that's always encapsulated in the same. You write it out as a story. Um, and how does that look like? So if we open the editor, what we have is the no. Every time I open cursor, it wants me to sign into this, and I don't know how to disable it. I'll figure that out. It's so annoying. Let's do this. My mouse is freaking out. Okay, so what you get when you initialize Storybook is you of course get a few dependencies, Storybook dependencies. You also get some configuration, which is inside the .storybook folder. There's the main config. This is similar to like a vconfig or a Svelte config, where you define all your add-ons and you define some globs for where to find your storage files. And then that we're using the SvelteKit integration. Then there's the preview file, which is little. I don't want to go too much into detail, but this is like the global stuff that you want to run whenever you render a story. Mm-hmm. So there's of course a bunch of settings that you can run for your stories, and these will be like global settings for all stories, and then you can override them on the story level. But you can also run whatever, like init my styles. You run those in here, and then that will run everywhere, right? And then let's look at the stories. So the button component is this button. This is just a Svelte component. There's nothing special about this. And then next to it, there's a .stories.svelte file. This is where you define your stories. You can think of these stories similar to how you think of unit tests, in that you want to define them next to the code that you're testing or that you're writing stories for. And so that's why it lives next to the components, but also that's why it lives in code, because then you can easily change it if you need to. And for writing stories, we have a syntax that we call component story format, which is the default way to write stories. But we realized some time ago that syntax or that format is not well suited for Svelte. So there's an alternative syntax that we call Svelte CSF, which is what I'm showing off here. And that's like, this is what we're promoting. This is what we're saying you should use when you're using Svelte. You can use the regular CSF format if you want to, but I wouldn't if you're writing so fast.
To be fair, like I don't think it really makes sense. Also because I might be biased, but I think that this is even more powerful. Like the fact that you can write your stories in a Svelte component means that you can also use reactivity in your like story setup, which is a bit different than like using reactivity just as like inside your components.
Exactly. Yeah. So this isn't just about, I want the syntax that I'm familiar with, and I'm familiar with Svelte syntax. This is also about like there's some things that you cannot do in regular JavaScript that you have to use a Svelte component for. And so what it all starts with is a meta definition. Every stories file needs one meta definition. And so you call this define meta that you import from the Svelte CSF add-on. This comes out of the box with Storybook. And here you write out the common things for all the stories for this specific component. So the title is something you can add in. If you don't put in a title here, it's just gonna be auto-populated by the I closed the server. It's going to be auto-populated by where the component lives. So now it's in stories button because of the folder stories button, right? And so by putting in a title, you can basically move it anywhere else, right? So I could put Paolo hello here, and then it should be under Paolo
Yeah,
hello.
that's actually nice.
Um,
I didn't know that it defaulted it in the folder.
mhm.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
it's pretty. It means that whatever folder structure you see in your
It's
editor,
the
you're going to see
same.
the
Yeah,
same thing
right.
in Storybook. That's pretty nice. Um, and and then you can define a component. That's what you usually do. You say I want to write story for the button component. You don't have to, but for the sake of the simplicity, let's assume that you do here. So we say all stories they render the button component.
Mhm.
And then you can define some tags where we have that autodocs tags tag, which is a built-in tag, but you can also add your own tags, and then that will allow you to filter stories with that tag. Um, it's a power user feature, so let's not get into that.
Yeah,
Um,
I actually never used it, but it's
no,
nice.
no, it's great for. But we've seen a lot of bigger enterprise teams do that. They tag with which team is responsible for this component, and so you can say, oh, team A's component, team B, and whatever. And they're also tagging sometimes with the stability of the component.
Yeah,
So
but
this
also, I
is
mean, like I can see that when you have like I don't know 1,000 stories, like I mean, maybe even not even 1,000 stories, maybe even 1,000 components, then
mm,
it is nice to have them like
mm,
compartmentalized in a
right.
different way.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna expand on this tags feature later. But essentially, the orthodox tags, what it does, it tells Storybook to generate this docs setting here, which is for another episode. So quickly, if we remove the orthodox tag, we will see that the docs is no longer here.
Mhm.
So that's basically what it does. Archetypes is also for a later discussion. It's essentially a way for you to manually define how the controls show up. So here we are saying that the background color prop is a color control. So it gives you the color picker, whereas if I put in Boolean here, it would give me the Boolean picker. It doesn't really make sense for color.
Mhm.
Um, and then arcs is just Storybook's other word for props. And it's a long history, but arcs is really just these are the props that are being passed to this component. You can manually say, I want some of these arcs not to be passed as props and some of these to be passed as props. That's why the naming is a bit weird. But essentially, this is where you define whatever you want to pass into to the um,
Mhm.
to the component. But mind you, this is all on the meta level. So this can be overwritten on the story level. So this is how you define a story in uh, in Storybook. So here you can see each of the stories that I have for the button, and then we put in another set of arcs. So so here primary is true, but on the secondary primary is nothing, right? And then we can also see size large on the large story. And if we change this to be a medium, we will see that the large story now has a
Pre-selected.
medium button. Yeah, and you can change it if you want to, right? But the pre-selected one, as you say, is the one you put in your code. And so these are very simple stories. We can write a new one. We just put it. So this story component is being returned by define meta. So we can put in another story, and we say we want this to get the label like this. And then we have another one here with the power label filled in. Still able to change whatever we want.
Mhm.
And so this is like the simplest way that we can take our
There
button
is
component.
also a question, sorry, which is
Yes, go
does
ahead.
it support env nicely, like sample superbase? I don't know specifically what it means, but like I think that like let's say that you have like in your component you are using superbase, for example. I think like maybe I don't know. Mike, if you want to specify the question better, I think we can answer better. But I think like I'll let Jeppe answer. But like my gut feeling is that like you really want to use this to test your components rather than like the
Right.
integration with Superbase, for example.
For sure. So one of the opinions that we have about front end testing and with Storybook is that you this is not an end to end world that you're building up here. You want your components or you want your stories, whatever they are, to only be about your UI and your front end. And so even the remote functions that you just showed off 20 minutes ago, I would say that when you're writing stories for components that you use remote functions, you want to mock out those remote
Yeah.
functions because you don't want to be calling the actual database from
Yeah.
within Storybook.
Yeah.
And we're not going to stop you. You can do whatever you want, but really, your Storybook should render the exact same pixels whether they're deployed in Australia or in Amsterdam or whatever. So yeah, so it's really I think we'll go into this maybe in the testing episode later about how you can mock out the different parts so you really get like a nicely isolated UI component, and that's what you want to do in Storybook. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but we can get into that later.
Yeah.
Cool. Just for fun, I can go into a bit of the stuff that we're doing here. So you see that there's an on-click arc that is just an FN. And what is this FN? If you know Vitest, it's similar to a mock function from Vitest. I think where you can import FN from Vitest. It's the same thing for Storybook. What this basically does is that on the surface it doesn't do anything, but it shows up in the actions panel. So there's this actions panel where you can log different stuff when you want to. And whenever we click the button, we see that the function logged an entry in here. And then we can see what was it called with or whatever. There's nothing really exciting here. I think maybe if we do the page example, we can... No, that doesn't have actions. The header one? Oh yeah, that will. So here you can see that there are different. We now have on login because I click login, or on sign up, or on create account, or whatever. So that way you can use these mock functions to get a sense of what's
Verify
happening.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very simple story, and this just shows. It takes the component that the component put up in here, and then pass in the props. What if you need something a bit more elaborate? There's different ways to define stories depending on the level of complexity that you need. You can also do a thing here where we pass in there's a prop called askChild, where now whatever child you put in here will be the story. So if I put in hello world, it does not work because I didn't put a name, I presume. Yes. Okay, so now there's no button. Now we're completely ignoring that component we put in the meta. We're just showing something in here. And so we can use that to our advantage to say, well, maybe we needed the button to be inside a wrapper for this specific story because we want to test how it is in a small, or like if it has a border on it, how does that work? So we could do this. I wonder what this shows. It probably doesn't show anything because we need a label. And yes. So now we can see that we can use this syntax to really completely define how our stories are rendered. And there's a bunch of different ways to write stories. If you go to the SvelteCSF add-ons GitHub, there's a README that documents all of these stuff. We're planning on getting this documentation fully into the real Storybook docs that you're seeing here, but we're not there yet. So for the Svelte syntax, I'll for now propose to look through this if you find it interesting. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, I guess. So this is example. This is a plain story.
I think if you can zoom in a couple more times, it's
For
probably
sure.
yeah.
Right. The next one with children is something that happens often, which I think I should show because I see a lot of beginners to Storybook that screw this up a bit. Essentially, if let's say you have a component that takes in children, which this button does not. So let's change the button to do that. So instead of putting in label, it would be render children, and then we get the children here, right? And let's, for the sake of it, also do this.
No, I think it's snippet.
Snippet. Thank you so much. And I need to import it. Oh, I can't. I don't care about the types at the moment. There's some way to get this.
You can do, if you're using a JS doc, you can do import inline. You can do either you can do add import on the top. Yeah, you can do add import snippet from Svelte.
Yes.
And
I guess I could do it in here as well.
Yeah, you can do it in line if you want. You can say, yeah, I wonder. That should work too.
I think it works.
Yeah.
And so now the button takes in a children prop. It doesn't take in a label. So I'm assuming that all the stories are going to be broken now. If you go back to yeah, this is not going to show anything because we have not updated the stories. So let's get rid of those, and then say, how do I pass in a children here? Because I can't just do children, and then how would I put a snippet in here? That doesn't. You could use create raw snippet. I wouldn't recommend that because it's really a low-level API. So what you do instead is that you pass in the child to story. So whatever child you pass in here, this is the button label. Now that will be forwarded as a child to the button. Hopefully. Yes. And so that's how you pass in children or snippets. And this really can make people confused because what they want to do, and what even AI want to do for me, is they want to put in the button and then pass it in.
Yeah.
But now you have a button in a button.
Yeah.
And you can actually see this slightly because you get the button inside the button. And so you shouldn't do that. That's the first trip up. I mean, we might figure out how to make this better so you don't. This is a gotcha that I don't like, and I want to make this better somehow.
I think like one thing that probably would help is that like right now story seems kind of disconnected from the component itself, while technically story is rendering the component. So maybe just renaming story to story button could help. I don't know.
Oh, right. Yeah. But potentially you could also rename it to component and then never know. I don't know. The way to get around this problem is what I showed before, is that if you put in the as child prop, which is like a Boolean, this basically says ignore the component up here and just render this as is. And so then you get the behavior that you expected. But that's not really necessary always. So now you have a story that passes in a child. And that's beautiful. Then there's the static template, which I just showed, which is the as child thing when you need that. The reason we call this a static template is because you can't use controls anymore for the children, because you're not forwarding these. Can we get back to? I guess we can. This button here, it doesn't get any of the arcs in. So there's, so I think even if we do change the controls here, they don't do anything. They have no impact because.
I mean, it really shows also because like you are passing arcs primary and it's not a primary button.
True. Right. Exactly. And that's totally fine. Maybe there's some stories where you're like, I don't care about the controls because that's not important to the story or whatever. But if you do need one, you want to do the inline snippet.
Mhm.
And so we have a very deep integration with snippets, which is also why this we I really recommend going Svelte 5
Yeah.
because otherwise it's going to be a worse experience. Um, so what you can do is define the template snippet, which takes in the arcs, and then yes, please, and then you can take these arcs and pass them into the button. Um, I don't know what that error is about. Oh, maybe because the ask child is weird. So if you look at this now, does that work? It does.
Right.
So what we changed here was that instead of passing in a child to story, we're passing in the template prop,
Mhm.
and then the story will re-render this snippet whenever the arcs changes. And this is also an example of where you can say, I want the if you're really weird, you say I want the primary prop to be shown here,
Mhm.
uh, and then you can see it changing
Yeah.
here, right? So you can really do whatever you want because it's just Svelte in the end.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can do a shared snippet,
Mhm.
shared template. That's very uncommon, but essentially you don't have to put in the template inside every story.
Yeah. I mean,
You
that's
have like,
that's just how Svelte works.
yeah, right. That's just how Svelte works, really.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't even document this because, well, there's nothing new about this. Um, we also have the default snippet. So instead of putting in the component, you can put in a render here and point that render to a snippet,
Mhm.
and then that will be what we render. Uh, and so that's more common, I think. That's actually, at least, like if you use Storybook for nothing or for other stuff than Svelte, then you will use the render function a lot. And this is allows you to customize basically whatever you want to do in here, right? And I think that's the gist of how you write stories. I went over a lot of
Mhm.
weird stuff. I think you really just have to try it out.
Yeah.
And again, come into this with the mindset that how would it look like if I were developing my components instead of my pages.
Mhm.
Um, what I had a good chat with Scott Zielinski from when we were in Barcelona the last Svelte Summit, and they were in the middle of reworking the Syntax FM site, and they did that in a component first way, as we call it, in that they build out, like, they have of course all their designs and stuff, and then they build out all the components in Storybook and just try them out, and then when the components are done, they plop
Yeah.
into the page, because at that point, well, it should just work, right? And then of course
Yeah.
there might be some iterations, but
Which is also
but
very useful. For example, we used it a lot when, like, obviously, a designer will give you a component, and we
mhm.
might also give you a page, but like it will also give you a component. So when you are building your design system, it's very useful because then like you can like show the designer inside
Mm.
Storybook, and they will actually see how, and they can actually play with the components. So it's very
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so often, so like there's this use case where, like, oh, you're being tasked with building this input field, but this is in a form in this modal that you can only get to if you're logging in or whatever, right?
yeah.
And so if you need to click the login button and open the form, you need to do that every single time when you're building that component to be able to see it, right, in your SvelteKit
Yeah.
site. But in Storybook, you can just see the component. I just want to see that and nothing else, right? And then I can put it into that form afterwards. So it's a lot easier to get into that mindset, and as you say, shared with designers. Like, we can talk about this in another episode. Like, you can share your Storybook, you can publish it, you can deploy it, and then the designer can say, oh, when I put in the primary to the button, I don't want it to get purple like that. I want it to get
Mhm.
whatever other color, right? And so sharing these components in an isolated way is very, very powerful way to like collaborate with stakeholders that are not that deep into coding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Something that I actually told last week was that I'm also very used to do script module because before you had to export the meta, but technically you don't have to, right? Because now you're
Uh,
just invoking defined meta. So
I think you do, because we do. So behind the scenes, we do a lot of AST parsing, and we actually
okay.
convert this into something very differently. So if you don't, I'm pretty sure we're going to give you an error saying that is not allowed. It breaks on the
All right.
internal,
Okay.
right? So I think you could do it outside of script module in the future, but we don't support that yet.
Yeah.
Essentially because you only want to run you want to run define meta immediately and not when you render
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
component. And if you want reactivity for whatever reason in your story, you just put in
Yeah.
your
You can
script tag,
obviously
and,
add
and
script
then
tag.
you do the states, and
I mean, you can also add state inside the script module. I do it all the time.
you can, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
There's
true.
nothing stopping you from.
There's very little that you can't do. I think effects you can't run them in module.
Not directly because like a module is effectively like to run an effect you need to be inside an effect,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you cannot run like that. You could create an effect route and then run an effect, but
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
yeah.
You
No,
shouldn't use
but
effect anyway.
right. But there's hopefully what I'm showing off gives you a lot of Svelte vibes, and like, oh, this is just Svelte. This is just how
Yeah.
Svelte works.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna in later Fridays we're gonna go into deeper how we can do this, use this for documentation or for testing or whatever. And if there's any questions about any of this or you
Yeah.
run into issues, then I'm always available on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
So I really urge anyone to just ping me. But this was just a quick intro to how Storybook works and what it
Yeah.
is.
And thank you very much, Yapam. And yeah, I think I mean I'll see you either next Friday or like in the next few Fridays to
Right.
like continue exploring this, because again,
Yeah.
as you've seen, like there's a bunch of things that
Mm.
Storybook can do, and it was really a shame like having just one single.
I would have been able. I would need to talk very fast.
Yeah. So it's much better. So we can actually get all the
And maybe if people have questions or anything, like we can go over them when
Yeah.
I come back. I think that
Yeah,
would be
absolutely.
fun.
Yeah.
Have some
Yeah.
interaction. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Thank you very much, Yapam. Thank you also for co-hosting, and thank you everybody for showing up. And I hope you learned something. And I'll see you guys next Friday. Bye bye.